Put it in five, I'll be outside, I'll be on the way. I'll be on the way, you can meet me in five, I'll be your man,
Hi guys,
I'll
welcome back
be
to the
all
All
day.
Sports Podcast. We are here on part one of a two-part college football playoff special. It's me and Ryan. Ryan, say what's up.
What's up, everybody?
We're going to cue the intro. All right, so we're just going to be talking about right now in this first part of this very special episode, we're going to be talking about the first six teams. So we have, right now we're starting off with Oregon. So the number one team in the country, basically been the number one team in the country in the entire season, realistically. Undefeated, 13-0, 13-0. And they're playing in the Rose Bowl like most Big Ten champions do. And it's very close to home, which is very beneficial for them since whoever they'll be playing is either Ohio State or Tennessee. And so they're going to have to travel a little bit. But starting off with that, let me tell you, they got screwed. For being the number one team in the country, they got screwed. When you look at it, Oregon just played in the Big Ten championship game against Penn State, and they beat Penn State. But you look at the matchups that both teams got, Penn State got the easier route to the college football playoff semifinals than Oregon did. Oregon basically, it looks like they got penalized for being the number one team in the country because they're either going to have to rematch Ohio State, who for a majority of the season was a top four team in the country before their loss to Michigan. Oregon only beat them by a point. And then Tennessee team, who has beaten Bama, played Georgia close. I mean, it's not a very friendly draw for them, let me tell you.
No, not at all.
But on the other hand, away from the negatives of Oregon, they have by far been the best team the entire season. They struggled a little bit in the first 2 weeks, almost kind of crapped the bed against Idaho and Boise State. But, I mean, since then, I mean, they have been clicking. I mean, Dylan Gabriel is a finalist for the Heisman. He will be going to New York. Is that this weekend? I believe it's this week.
I think so.
It's got to be this weekend because there's games next weekend. So, I mean, he's thrown for almost 3,600 yards and 28 touchdowns and only 6 interceptions. And then they have a running back, what's his first name? Jordan James, with over 1,200 rushing yards and 15 touchdowns. So, I mean, this is a team where they are clicking. They are a good team on all sides of the ball. I mean, both sides of the ball. Dan Lanning's got the Ducks cooking. And, I mean, I think this is very beneficial for them. They played a tough game against Penn State to get that bye. So this bye week is going to be, well, these 2 bye weeks, technically.
2 weeks.
With the Army-Navy game. So I just wish they would have gotten a better draw. Do you agree with that?
Oh, I 100% agree. I think, and it's why they even asked Ward Manuel on the college football playoff selection show, like, is that taken into account at all, the matchups? And he said no, that it's not taken into account, that it's just solely based on seeding. But just goes to show you that it's not just something that even we notice, that this is something that was very noticed in how difficult a first game Oregon's going to have. And I think especially they've struggled against the run pretty significantly. I mean, Penn State ran for almost 300 yards against them in the Big Ten championship and made that game close. There's a reason they struggled and only beat Boise State by 3 with Ashton Jeanty, who I think should be the Heisman winner this season.
Who will be? Let's be
Who
honest.
probably will be. So I think it's going to be a tough out with if Ohio State's offense plays well the way that we know them to be, or Tennessee's offense clicking on all cylinders, which we have seen them be very scary. It's going to be a tough first game. Yes, it's nice that it's the Rose Bowl and that it's close to them and that it's somewhere that they've played pretty frequently in the past couple of years. But it's not your home college campus. It's almost a case where you would rather play them at your own college campus, one of these two teams, because you know their fan bases are going to travel well.
That's a really another big question when people were talking about what fixes kind of need to be made to the playoff for next year. That was a big one, was the 4 teams that get a bye don't get the option to host a playoff game. And that's a big part of why you wanted to be a top, 5, 6, just 5, 6, 7,
5,
right?
6, 7.
Yeah, 5, 6, 7. As you wanted to host a playoff game. It's the first time ever that a college football playoff game is on a college campus. That's a big deal. I mean, look, Ohio State's hosting one. Penn State's doing their famous whiteout game against SMU. Like, good luck to SMU for that. So, I mean, it's just one of those things where hopefully they expand to that, where the 4 team, where they cut less of the bowl games, let some of the other teams that aren't in the playoff play in those games. Yes, you'll make less money, NCAA, I know. Don't ban me for saying it. But, I mean, it's one of those things where I think the four teams that get a bye deserve that also. I mean, imagine a game on a Georgia campus or an Arizona State campus, which is a party school heaven, both of those two, or a Boise State where you just saw the Mountain West Championship. There was that place was packed. I mean, I just think that would be really cool. Yes, you'll make less money, but I think that's a very big part. But Oregon is a team where, in my opinion, you will see our brackets that we make. They should be either in the national championship or winning the national championship, in my honest opinion, because I think they have just been clicking on all cylinders here at the end of the season. They had a little slip up against Wisconsin, but I mean, that happens. But I mean, Penn State's defense is kind of what they've been known for, and they dropped 45 points on them. So I think they got a pretty, besides the opening game, then you're going to have to play either probably most likely Texas or Arizona State, which I like that better than for them, other than having to play Georgia before they get to the national championship. Because right now,
I would much rather play one of those two teams because your offense, if you contain with Arizona State, contain Scatterboo, however you say his last name.
Let's not get too far ahead.
But if you contain them or Texas team that has been kind of off, I think you just have to make it through that first round game.
Yeah, you make it through this first round game. If you're Oregon, you should be playing for the national championship in Atlanta.
I think so. I think it's at the Superdome there.
Atlanta, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Yep, Atlanta. Georgia's probably going to get another home game if they make it there, but we'll save that for when we talk about Georgia. But other than that, I mean, we're just keeping it short here on these teams that we're talking about. So, I mean, Oregon, if they keep playing the way they've been playing, if Dylan Gabriel keep playing the way he's playing, like a Heisman candidate like he is, they should make the national championship. So that's all we're going to have for Oregon. We're going to be moving on to, I believe, Georgia next. All right, so here we are talking about Georgia next, the number 2 overall team in the country, 2-seeded team in the country, I should say. And there's some big questions for Georgia here coming out of that SEC championship game. They got a huge win in overtime over Texas. It gives them the real time. If there's a team that needed this 2-week bye to get healthy, it's Georgia. Because their starting quarterback, Carson Beck, UCL injury. Don't really know how serious it is. I haven't really seen anything about people, like how serious people are saying it is or not. I did see a report that he most likely would miss the Sugar Bowl. Don't know how true or false that is. But, I mean, their backup quarterback led them to that overtime win. So and he was a 5-star recruit. It's not like you're dropping off that big. So either way, they're going to be playing Notre Dame or Indiana. If I'm Georgia, I'm most likely hoping Indiana wins because Indiana kind of matches up better. I mean, Indiana matches up better for Georgia's defense because they're kind of a true air raid team, like you'll listen to in our Indiana part of this. Indiana matches up better against Notre Dame because of their air raid, but they match up worse against Georgia because of how good Georgia's pass rush is and how good their safeties are and their cornerbacks. But Notre Dame, on the other hand, has Jeremiah Love, who they're going to try and power run the ball down your throat the entire game. So if I'm Georgia, I'm hoping Indiana wins. But, I mean, right now, I think I don't know what the betting odds are, but Georgia's got to be obviously number 1 or number 2 on the betting odds to win the national championship because, I mean, besides a couple slip-up games like Ole Miss and Bama, who were teams right on the cusp of the playoff, they were very close to making it in. Those two teams were, and those were their 2 losses. So this Georgia team is cream of the crop with Oregon. These are the 2 favorites. So my opinion, not really much to say about Georgia. They're just good, like they have been the past 5 years. They should be in the national championship too. Fine?
Yeah, I think Georgia's route to the national championship is pretty favorable for them. And I think anybody who watched that SEC championship game and said Georgia's done without Carson Beck, I think you're in just as good of a position with Gunnar Stockton as you are with Carson Beck, if not arguably slightly better, because Gunnar Stockton, as we saw against Texas, they were not prepared at all for a Georgia quarterback to run the ball. They were used to a Carson Beck who, yeah, he's athletic and he can get out of the pocket a little bit, but he's not going to beat you with his legs. And Gunnar Stockton came in and was quarterback power running the ball and was moving it pretty significantly against Texas for a good part of that game. And really, if you take out an interception on Georgia's their last drive of regulation, he played a pretty good game, a pretty good second half, and really was the reason that Georgia won that game because they had nothing going prior to that point. So if I'm a Georgia fan, I'm not overly worried about is Carson Beck going to be back, and if not, we're screwed because I think we're still gonna see a very good Georgia team. There's a lot of players who have been in the college football playoffs and have been part of national championship teams, and you've arguably got the best coach in college football right now, in Kirby Smart. I think the best
since Nick Saban retired. He is, yeah. I completely agree with everything you just said. I mean, this is, and like you're saying, their route to the national championship. If you couldn't have asked for a better 6-team kind of bracket there to get to the national championship. I mean, you avoid Oregon, you avoid Texas, who you just went to overtime with, you avoid Arizona State, you avoid Tennessee, who played you very close. You avoid Ohio State, who is probably in that top 4 betting odds to win the national championship. I mean, you got Boise State, who is questionable to even be the 3 seed, but that's just kind of how it fell out. Then you got Penn State, SMU, who shouldn't even realistically be in the playoff. And then you have Indiana and Notre Dame. I mean, you couldn't ask for anything better if you're a Georgia fan. The only team probably happier is Penn State, but, I mean, we'll get there. But
I think this would have been the path that if I was Oregon, I would have wanted.
Oh, yeah.
If I was
100%.
Oregon, 100 times out of 100, I would trade positions with Georgia and say I'd rather take the winner of Notre Dame, Indiana, and then if I win that, play the winner of either SMU,
Boise
Penn
and Penn
State,
State.
and Boise and Penn State. I will gladly take those two games to get myself to the national championship.
If I have to be the 2 seed, I'll take that if I was Oregon. So, other than that, I don't think there's much left to say on Georgia. I mean, they're Georgia, stud defense, stud all the way around. And I think whichever quarterback plays, they're good. They're set. There's no
They'll be
big
fine.
drop. There's no big drop off with who's ever playing at quarterback, as it shows. I mean, they beat a Texas team who's a number 2 team in the country with their backup. So
They won 2 national titles with a former walk-on who went to a community college for a year and came back. So
yeah, exactly. They're set. So, all right, that's going to do it for Georgia. We're going to be moving on here to talk about Penn State, and we'll see you guys there. All right, here we are talking about Penn State, the number 6 seeded team in the country for this college football playoff. And as we've kind of talked about here on these first 2 teams on this episode of Georgia and Oregon, this is a team where I'm jumping for joy when I saw this draw. I mean, holy crap. If you're telling me I would have lost the Big Ten championship game and gotten the worst team in the college football playoff, I think that's no argument, right? That's very comfortable to say.
I'm 100% in agreement with saying that.
That you got the worst team in the field at home in a whiteout game for Penn State, and then you play right now the way Arizona State's playing. I think Arizona State is a better team than Boise State, a better overall team than Boise State. Troy's not on here to get mad at me for that, but overall, I think Arizona State's better than Boise State. So, I mean, right there, this is the best draw you could have gotten. I mean, you get to go up against SMU and then Boise State, and, I mean, I would be so happy. I think the biggest thing with Penn State here is, since we're not really going to spend that much time talking about them, is, I mean, if their offense plays the way they did against Oregon, if their defense can just step up a little bit, yeah, it's a little different playing SMU than it is playing Oregon, but they should be fine. They should be playing Georgia or whoever makes it out of that lower bracket in the Orange Bowl in the semifinal. And that's just how the draw lays it out. I think that's really the best path for them. I think if Drew Aller takes care of the ball, they don't turn the ball over, they should be good. I think they match up very, 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 very well against these 2 teams. They're bigger up front on both sides of the ball. And they're kind of playing for their lives here because, like we said, with the Notre Dame and the Ohio States and the Indiana part, you'll hear that soon. Sorry, I'm kind of jumping the gun here, but they're playing for their life. James Franklin's playing for his job, I would think. If you come in here and lay an egg at home and lose in this first game, I think he's done. Because they've been a team who've had 1 loss and been kept out of 1 or 2 losses and been kept out of the college football playoff, the 4-team playoffs. And you're finally in it.
That's what I was just about to say is Penn State to me, for as many years back as, I mean, at least the last 5 years, has been this consistently good against subpar or bad teams and has done nothing against good teams. Usually only played 1 or maybe 2. Usually their 2 losses were Michigan and Ohio State every year. Kept them out of the Big Ten championship, and the 2 losses kept them out of the 4-team playoffs. This year, you don't play Michigan. You lose to Ohio State. You get in by Ohio State losing to Michigan to the Big Ten championship, and you lose again to another ranked team. They only have 1 ranked win this season, and it was then 19 Illinois, 21-7, but that was back in September, early September. So to me, Penn State I think they got a good draw overall, and I think SMU is a very beatable team. But there ain't no way I'm ever going to say that I think Penn State makes it to the semifinals or to the finals at no way they're beating Georgia, and no way they're ever winning this national championship. Because this Penn State team just lucked out in the fact that their mediocrity in the Big Ten, the SEC shot themselves in the foot, beating each other too much, and you just so happen to be a Big Ten team that sneaks in. Because arguably, Indiana has a slightly better resume, if I would say, just based on how they won games. I mean, you look at the average margin of victory in games across this season, even against some common opponents, Indiana has better wins.
Yeah. They really just both kind of got the benefit of the 18-team Big Ten schedule draw.
Yeah.
Not having to play Oregon or, I mean, they both played Ohio State, but, I mean, yeah, I agree with you. Sorry to cut you off. You can keep going. Sorry to cut you off.
No, so I think you hit it on the head that Penn State got very, very lucky with this draw. And I think I've been saying it from the start of this season. I think Penn State's fraudulent. And I have been saying it ever since the start that I think they were only going to sneak in because they weren't going to play enough good teams to knock them out of the playoffs. And it's exactly what happened. They only played 2 good teams, and those 2 good teams beat them. But they're here because they were in the Big Ten Championship, and they can't be held out because they lost in the Big Ten Championship to the number 1 team. I would favor them against SMU for sure, but it would not shock me to see Boise beat them. Not because I think Boise State is a better team, but because I don't think Penn State can show up when the lights are the brightest. And I think a player like Ashton Jeanty is going to gash this defense in the same way that Oregon's rushing attack did. This defense gave up 45 points to Oregon just this last weekend. Jeanty put almost 200 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns against Oregon?
Mm-hmm.
He's a good-ass player, and I think he slashes them, and I think Boise beats them in that quarterfinals game in a close one. And then I think, like you said, James Franklin, in the same way that we're talking about Ryan Day's job, I think James Franklin's is right there on the chopping block too, because neither one of them have been able to win big games.
Yeah, I agree big time. So, yeah. Other than that, I think that does it for Penn State. I'm not saying I favor them big time over Boise State. I think it'll be a very close game. My point was just for a team that I don't think is very good, this is the best draw you could have hoped for. We're going to be moving on here to the last one without a special guest hinting at an SMU. So we will see you guys in that one.
Put it in 5, I'll be outside, I'll be on the way. I'll be on the way, you can meet me in 5, I'll be your 9, I'll be all day. I'll be all day.
All right, and we're back here talking about SMU, the last team before our special guests of this part 1 of the College Football Playoff podcast. The SMU, are they the Mustangs or the Ponies?
Mustangs.
The Mustangs. They snuck in the playoff. They are the last team in, and they will be going up against a decently tough Penn State team. Tough environment, though. Noon game, whiteout in Happy Valley. Is it Happy Valley? Yeah, in Happy Valley. It's a tough draw for them. Also, at the same time, a pretty decent draw. But, I mean, realistically, if you're SMU, you were really hoping you could have pulled that Clemson game out to get that bye where you wouldn't even have to be playing this game. They were a special teams lapse, giving up a big kick return away from having a bye and being a top 4 team. Not saying they would have won in overtime. I'm just saying they could have won in overtime instead of giving up a 53-yard field goal. But the thing with SMU is they've got to come out and show up against Penn State if they want to win this game. They went down, was it 14 or 17 points very quickly, very early to Clemson, just from a sloppy start. I mean, strip sack, then an interception, and then like a 3-and-out. So I mean, you gotta start quicker than that. And a team like Penn State is gonna feed off of this environment. If you give up an early turnover or an early touchdown to them, that crowd's intensity is just gonna get even higher and higher and higher and higher.
Exactly.
And it's going to get even tougher for you. So that's really the only point I've got is you just got to have a better start. And if you don't have a better start, then this is going to be a pretty much near impossible game to win because you got to keep the crowd out of it because one of the top, it's got to be a top 10 biggest stadium in college football, if not top 5. And it's going to be packed. It's going to be sold out and it's a white out too. So you've got to show up and show out early if you want to have a chance to win this game.
Yeah, I think overall there were question marks with SMU getting in just because of the body of work in the same way that we've talked about Penn State not having beaten anybody who was ranked. It was the same argument with SMU, except that they went undefeated through ACC play to the conference championship with their only loss in the conference being to Clemson in the championship and then to ranked BYU. They're going to have to play very, very well on a road game in Happy Valley to get this win here. I think you have to spread Penn State's defense out. You have to throw the ball around well and effectively in order to open up running lanes because otherwise you're going to struggle to get the ball moving. And like you said, all it's going to take is a couple 3-and-outs in a row or a pick or a fumble or any special teams lapse and that huge crowd there is against you and it's just going to become this snowball that becomes harder and harder to stop. So they're really going to have to get out to a quick start, score first ideally to kind of quiet that crowd down and keep them in their seats. And that's really the only way that I can see them getting this thing done.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the one plus side I will give SMU, just kind of final touch here, is it's incredible that they're even here right now. I mean, they are first year in a Power 4 conference. They're in the American Athletic Conference last year. They made the they made the conference championship. They won the regular season ACC. So, I mean, that alone is a very big deal for their first year in the ACC. So I give them props for that. But like I said, like we both said, they're going to have to show up very early and keep the crowd out of it if they want to win this game. But other than that, I mean, it's been a great season for SMU. If they can pull out a win here, it'll be even better. But other than that, I mean, they've had a very great, successful year and hopefully keep building on it.
Yeah, I mean, I look at them in the same light as I do Indiana, who we're going to talk about next, in the sense that if you win this game, amazing, huge for the program. But if you don't, it's still getting to the playoffs in your first year, and the ACC is huge for the program. You've put yourself on a map in the first year that a lot of these other schools didn't, and I think it really sets you up well for the future. But, man, if you get a win, 1 or 2 wins in this playoffs, your brand is skyrocketing if you're SMU.
100%. I think that's all we're going to have on SMU. You're going to hear from 2 special guests from Indiana and Arizona State next for the first part of this episode. So, yeah, we thank you, and we'll see you guys in the Indiana. All right, we're going to be moving on here to our next team in the college football playoff episode. We're going to be talking about the Indiana Hoosiers. We got a very special guest, Sarah Barlow, or better yet known as our mother. Mom, say hello.
Hi.
Mom was the last one of the family to get on a podcast, so we're happy we were finally able to get her on. And obviously Ryan's here.
College football
for
and
Indiana.
Yeah. And obviously Ryan's still here because he's been on for all the other teams. So we're here. It's a Barlow episode. Well, hopefully not the whole one, but you get the gist. Mom, whoever ever would have thought we would be talking about Indiana football in the college football playoffs? In the first season of the 12 team, any expectation coming into this season? Did you think Indiana had a chance of making the playoffs?
Nope. Nope.
No.
Not a chance. They football was never their specialty at IU. My freshman year, we won 3 games, I think. My sophomore year, we were 0-11. That was Bill Mallory's first year as head coach. He did improve. I think my senior year, they were 4-7. So, he won a few more games, but it was never much about watching good football games when you went to the football games. It was just have fun at the tailgates and wait for basketball season.
Basically how Kentucky felt this year for football, right? Yep. Okay.
Exactly.
I mean, it's one hell of a season, and I think bringing in Curt Cignetti as the coach was just the absolute perfect recipe for success for Indiana, because he's a guy who, if you listen to any of his interviews, he expects to win. This is where he expected to be. He wasn't like, we shocked the world and we're here. We did, but this is where we were meant to be. This is where we should have been the entire year. And
yeah, I feel like he's never really taken on the Cinderella role that I kind of would have expected to see from like an Indiana team. We think in the college basketball sense, some of these coaches embrace the Cinderella role, the FAU going all the way to the Final Four a couple years ago. They kind of take on that Cinderella underdog role, and it has never once really felt like Curt Cignetti has ever felt like the underdog in any of their games, even against Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't put the best foot forward in that game, but I mean, for the aspect that it is, they went 11-1. And the biggest thing everybody said the whole year with Indiana was, oh, their strength of schedule, they've played nobody, blah, 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 blah. They're playing a Power 4 schedule. And what did we just learn with Alabama and SMU is it's not always necessarily playing 3 freaking ranked teams in your non-conference schedule. It's you're trying to build enough wins to even like be in the conversation. Like if Indiana was 10-2 or even 9-3, they wouldn't even be in the conversation. There's no chance. But the thing that stands out to me with Indiana is there's teams in this playoff when they play these crappy teams, these out-of-conference games, they play them close for a majority of the game. The thing Indiana did was they absolutely waxed every team that they were supposed to wax. Like Purdue and their rivalry week, they beat them 66-0.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know if Purdue even got the ball on Indiana's side of the field, really. I really don't. And I wasn't really surprised with it. And like teams, like they played some tough competition in the Big Ten too. Like the Big Ten is always like, it's like the SEC. Every team's going to play you well. Every team's good. Like you look at a team like Nebraska, who played a lot of teams close. They only lost by a touchdown to Ohio State. Indiana beat them by 49 points.
Yeah, they killed them. But then IU struggled with Michigan, though, too.
Mm-hmm.
But then Michigan comes back and beats Ohio State. So there's a somewhat parity, I feel like, with a lot of the teams in the Big Ten, which you haven't seen in years past. I feel like it's always been your top couple teams, and that's it. I do agree. I wish they would have shown up a bit more at Ohio State, because I don't really feel like they played up to the potential, but happens. It happens. He reminds me a lot of Bobby Knight, actually, and just his confidence and his wanting to get excitement back into the community and the student body and the whole university around football, that it's not just basketball, or we always have great soccer programs and baseball programs and all that, but he just has a confidence about him, and thankfully everyone kind of followed suit and showed up.
I mean, College Game Day was there. If that alone isn't a big enough step, I mean, College Game Day usually at the Alabamas, the LSUs, the Texas A&Ms, the Georgias of the college football world. They came to Bloomington. So, I mean, that's a pretty big deal. And I should have said this at the beginning. If you didn't already realize, our mom graduated from Indiana, so that is why she's a fan. Should have put that out there. But moving on here, talking about the actual.
And I graduated the year we won the NCAA tournament, beating Syracuse with Keith Smart making the last second shot with a pass from my buddy Daryl Thomas to beat Syracuse and Jim Boeheim, whatever, however you say his name. So yeah.
She had to put that out there.
I did.
Obviously, talking about the game coming up here against Notre Dame, a little in-state rivalry. I wouldn't say a rivalry because they don't really ever play, but an in-state game.
When is the last? I don't even know.
I don't know.
Last time they played.
Yeah, but me and Ryan were actually talking about this the other day. If you could have asked for any better matchup for Indiana, I don't know what it could have been, because this is, you take out a lot of different kind of aspects of a home field advantage for Notre Dame. Notre Dame was hoping they would get paired up against a Southern team like a Tennessee or an SMU or a Clemson even, because their northern weather, their South Bend, Indiana weather, an hour and a half from here, it's going to be probably 20, 30 degrees when they play. Yeah. Indiana's used to that because, look, Indiana's last 2 home games of the year, it was snowing. So, I mean, they're used to it. There's one thing taken off. And Indiana's been playing in maxed out stadiums the entire year because they've been a ranked team the entire season. So
they've had a target on their back this whole year, and being only, how far is it from Bloomington to South Bend, Mom?
It's probably 2.5.
So easily drivable for a group of Indiana fans that have never seen success like this with a football program, that I think you're going to see a lot of red at Notre Dame Stadium.
And
it's sold out.
I think the biggest, it did sell out. And I mean, we were looking at tickets and it was $1,300 for a ticket because we first saw it and we're like, oh crap, we can get some tickets and go to the game. But yeah, that didn't last long after we saw those prices. But I think the biggest thing that stands out to me is Indiana's kind of a true kind of an air raid offense. I mean, their leading rusher only has 800 rushing yards on the entire season, but then Curtis Rourke, their quarterback, who is a stud, who has played himself into a mid-round draft pick. He's even being called some of the sleepers of the draft here that teams are going to be able to get in the 3 to 5 range. But, I mean, he's thrown for close to 3,000 yards and 27 touchdowns and only 4 interceptions.
And they're averaging 40 points per game.
So, I mean, just that right there. If you look at the teams that played Notre Dame close this season, like Notre Dame their last game they played against USC, and USC is basically an air raid team. And let's be honest, USC is not as good as Indiana. And the game, yes, Notre Dame won by 2 touchdowns, but they threw 2 pick sixes in the last 5 minutes of the game. So it kind of blew that wide open. 99-yard pick sixes, too, to put that out there. So, I mean, it's one of those things where, like, I just think this is the best matchup for Indiana possible. And when we talk about our bracket as the 6 of us, this is the upset I have in the first round. I have Indiana beating Notre Dame, going to South Bend and beating Notre Dame. Pap and them aren't going to be happy with me, but out of all of them, I think this is the most realistic of the upsets. Because if I was Notre Dame, I would have much rather played a running team. So, because that's what they are very good at.
Yeah, that's your strong suit is defending the run.
So, I mean, if Rourke is able to not take sacks, because obviously their D-line is better than Indiana's O-line, if he's able to just get the ball out quick, and I mean, they have some stud playmakers. I mean, their receiving core, obviously a lot of them have a lot of yards because he has a lot of passing yards. But Sarrett has close to 1,000 receiving yards with 8 touchdowns. Cooper has over 500 with 6 touchdowns. I mean, there's a lot of guys here with just a lot of yards and everything like that. So get the ball up quick and get the ball into their hands. And I think this is a very realistic upset.
I feel like, too, that Indiana doesn't have anything to lose at this point. I feel like Notre Dame has more of a target on their back at this stage of the game than Indiana does. So, I mean, just go and lay it all out there. We've never in the history of the football team had 10 wins. So it's like,
let alone 11.
Yeah. So it's like, let it keep going, and we'll see what happens. I just want them to win so I can fly my IU flag.
I just think it's, if anything, I mean, right now Notre Dame is a 7.5 point favorite over Indiana. But the thing is, Indiana's defense is good too. Like they gave up 38 points to Ohio State, yes, but that was just kind of feels like in the
Also,
fourth
they had a
quarter
last
watching
second
that.
touchdown that was kind
Yeah.
of the game was already over.
So I mean, but like you look at, yeah, Michigan's offense wasn't very good all year, so I'm not even really going to bring that one up. But I mean, they held Nebraska to 7 points. They held Northwestern to 24, which is a lot. They held UCLA to 13 points. Then all these bad teams they played, I mean, 7 points, 3, 13, 14, 17, 10. Like Purdue
And
to
meanwhile,
zero.
they're
Purdue to
scoring
0.
50, 60,
Yeah.
48, 50. Like they're scoring a lot.
Mm-hmm. I just think I love the point that you brought up, Mom, with the kind of the nothing to lose, because that's kind of the same. It's kind of probably the same aspect that Tennessee's going in with Ohio State, because Ohio State, all the pressure is on them. I mean, they just lost to Michigan. All the pressure's on Ryan Day, and Tennessee is we're kind of like rebuilding. Yeah, we were supposed to be good, but I mean, if we lose, we lose. Like we made it here, but if we win, we got nothing to lose. Let's just put it all out there. And it's the same. I think Notre Dame and Ohio State are in the same boat where they've kind of been on the borderline of this 4-team playoff the past couple of years, haven't been able to sneak in. And the 12-team playoff finally opened up and they finally got in. And the pressure's on them because they've been talking all this game about how they deserve to be in here and blah, 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 blah. And I think Notre Dame probably got the worst matchup they could have gotten. Either Indiana or Tennessee were probably the worst two matchups Notre Dame could have gotten, and they got one of them because both of them are just true air raid offenses, and they're going to just try and beat you throwing the ball, and that's where Notre Dame's very weak.
And I think we've seen a success a lot in college and the pros with a coach who's not afraid to just go for it. I mean, we see it with Dan Campbell and the Lions all the time, and some of these more kind of out there and go for it mentality coaches, I think Cignetti falls right along with there. And that he's confident enough that if it's fourth and anything close, if it's a tie ball game and he's got to kick an extra point or go for a 2-point conversion, he's going for it. And so it puts a lot of pressure on Notre Dame to be on their game the entire day, because the second that they aren't, Indiana's going to capitalize. And I think we've seen them struggle in big games across the past couple of years in this playoffs and back even into the BCS national championships where they've struggled. So it'll be interesting to see if they can reverse that or not.
Mm-hmm. All right. Mom, you got any final touches?
No, I'm just excited that everyone in my family for once may be cheering for my Hoosiers, because usually it's me against the world.
It's usually basketball. I mean, Indiana-Kentucky basketball rivalry is like one of the top ones ever. So this is a little different.
I do have to say one fact. Andy used to own a pair of candy stripe pants.
Okay.
And they got to shoot baskets on Assembly Hall's floor and make baskets. So that's pretty cool. But now on to football. Now we got to make a name in football. So go IU. Go Big Red. IU.
All right. That's what we're going to leave it on. And like I said, I think this is the upset that's going to happen in this first round. So, Mom, I'm with you. However you do it. However, if it's like that, IU. That's where we're leaving it. All right, Mom, we appreciate you joining us.
Anytime.
So we will see you guys on that next one. Thank you. All right, we're here doing our last and final team of this part 1 of the college football playoff episode, the Arizona State Sun Devils, and we have our second special guest, Mr. Brady Lorenz. Brady, it's a pleasure to finally have you on. I feel like we've talked to you multiple times about this. Brady actually went to Arizona State for 2 years before going to the Naval Academy, so a little bit of change of scenery there from school to school, but
yeah, number one party school in the country to the last place in the country in partying.
Yeah, pretty much, and big climate change as well. So it was good. They weren't too good when I was there, so they're a lot better now.
I mean, they were picked to finish, I think, last place this year in the Big 12. Mm-hmm. So I mean, it's a big turnaround. But I mean, they've shocked a lot of people, and they shocked me, honestly. I didn't really know anything about them coming into this year, or realistically until the last month when they were kind of in competition to play for the Big 12 championship. And they obviously deserved it because they waxed Iowa State in the championship game. So, and I think it's an absolute scam that Skattebo is not a Heisman finalist. I mean, yeah, he doesn't have as great as of stats, and he missed a game, but still, I mean, over 1,500 rushing yards and 19 touchdowns. That's pretty spectacular. But
absolutely.
Just real quick before we let Brady talk, their draw, I mean, not as bad as we were talking earlier about Oregon, not clearly as bad as that, but I mean, Texas and Clemson, they'll play the winner of that game. And honestly, I'm not really too worried about either team. I think Arizona State matches up well with them. Texas, honestly, I was kind of hyping up their defense last week, talking about the SEC championship, and they didn't look that good against Georgia.
No.
And Levitt is a running quarterback, kind of like that Stockton kid is, and Texas couldn't stop him. So, and Clemson, I don't really think is anything to really worry about. So, in my opinion, but Brian, what do you got for Brady? Let's fire off some questions here to Brady.
Brady, I know you're not a huge college guy, but what would you kind of say if you're given Arizona State one offensive and defensive key for whoever they end up playing? Most likely, we're guessing it's Texas. If you were to give them kind of one offensive and defensive key to win that game, what would it be?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where you got to start. I think most people would expect. I'm going to start with offense. I'm a big offensive guy. Defense, I'm like whatever. I don't really care about. I play wide receiver. I like scoring and taking the over. But so starting with the offense, I would say most people would expect me to say Skattebo, right? He's got to dominate. He's got to be an absolute rock in the running game and just keep the defense busy all day. I'm not going to say that. I think everyone expects Cam Skattebo to just go crazy. And I also would expect any defense that's trying to win a game against the Sun Devils to really line up on him, stack the box, and try to crush the run. So I'm going to say the key to ASU victory has got to be with Sam Levitt and the passing game, just keeping defenses honest. A big thing that we've seen is they've lost their number one receiver. I had to write all this stuff down. I have a hard time keeping up the names, but Jordan Tyson, he was their number one guy. He had a lion's share of the receptions and touchdowns in the receiving game. He's out for the season. So what we can expect is either ASU is going to completely fall with no passing help essentially to take the pressure off of Skattebo, or if they do well, I think it'll be because of Xavier Guillory. He's the second up wide receiver, 19 receptions, 320 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Again, nothing really comparable to Tyson's work before he got injured, but definitely like the number 2 guy up. And then as well, I think it's Shimon Mateer is their number 1 tight end right now. He's a transfer from Colorado, I believe. He didn't stay there a long time, but he was there through like training camp and decided he wasn't cut out for the cold and wanted to come back to the warm. He's like originally from Miami area, but he has 29 receptions, 290 yards, 5 touchdowns as well. So between those guys, 10 touchdowns. I think if they can step up and help out Sam Levitt, I think that Cam Skattebo will not be focused on as much, and that way they can really have a full, true run at it as far as going deep into the playoffs. Defense, dude, I don't even know, man. I'm a wide receiver, bro. What I wrote down was in each matchup, the defense needs like at least 1 key turnover that changes momentum, or 2 less important turnovers that are kind of not momentum changers. But I would say if you can get 1 key turnover or 2 less important but still important turnovers, that's going to be huge. Just keeping ASU on offense and keeping the momentum. That's a big thing for them, right? Like they have all the momentum right now. They're hot. They're not necessarily a top like NFL talent team with a bunch of guys that are going to go, high in the draft. They got a couple, but they're looking at 5. They needed 5 straight wins to make the playoffs, and they made that happen. So I think they have the hot hand right now, and Those would definitely be like my keys. I think Sam Leavitt's playing great. He's going to continue to play great. It's really just like, can they fill in the loss of Jordan Tyson? And he wasn't, a Heisman wide receiver candidate, but he was quite good. And he was like the number one guy. He was dominating. So if they can fill in for him and take some of that pressure off Cam Skattebo, I think they're going to have, a decent chance.
Yeah, I think we saw in the way that Georgia beat Texas the first time, it was turnovers, short field, and that was kind of how they scored and got the advantage. So I think if Arizona State can replicate that defensively, like you were saying, Brady, I think that's kind of the key to getting them their offense on the field, and then you just ride Skattebo and run the clock down and hitting some plays. You don't need your receivers to be all-world receivers. You just need them to be good enough to open that run game for your star running back.
Absolutely.
I didn't realize with Tyson he had 75 receptions, and the next closest was Skattebo with 37. I didn't realize it was that big of a disparity there on their receiving core, but it's very well spread out after Jordan Tyson was kind of the leader of the pack, but then after that it was very even spread. And they threw the ball well against Iowa State, and Iowa State was known this year for their defense. And number one, they couldn't stop Skattebo. That's obvious, but they couldn't really stop the pass either. Leavitt was doing whatever he wanted, and he brings that other aspect. He brings that running game that Texas struggled with, like what I said at the beginning. And he had a lot of they weren't even designed runs, just kind of scrambles where he set them up perfectly. He almost scored on one. I remember watching, he's kind of fell. It was kind of funny, but they have other aspects of their offense other than just Cam Skattebo, and that's the biggest thing. And where, like Brady said, a lot of teams are obviously going to focus in, how are we going to stop this guy? So it's who else in the offense can step up and really supply them with the offense if, let's say, he does get shut down. The thing I want to touch on is Kenny Dillingham, the head coach. He was they were picked in last place to finish in the Big 12, and he was picked in last place as the coach, like the overall coach rankings. And he's shocked everybody. He's led his team to the playoff, first round bye, Big 12 championship, whatever you want to say. He brings a sort of energy. After watching the BYU game, it was BYU, when they left 1 second on the clock or whatever, and just seeing him absolutely getting pissed off at the refs was he's a younger guy. It's one of those things where it's cool to see, and he just brings a whole nother energy to him, where if you would have told me before the season that Arizona State would have a first round bye in the playoffs, I probably would have said you were crazy, but here we are. So
yeah, definitely.
Kind of just I just think touching on with their draw, kind of going back to that, is compared to the other teams, Georgia's going to have to play Notre Dame or Indiana. Boise State's going to play Penn State. That's obviously the best one. But Oregon and Tennessee and Ohio State, I think it's a blessing that Arizona's kind of avoiding any of those teams, where they get to play a Texas team, most likely, hypothetically Texas, where I think they favor very well in a matchup. I think Texas's offense isn't as firepower as we all thought they were going to be this year with Quinn Ewers. And I think that pairs up well because, Arizona State, they've played some good defense all season. I think that continues. They kind of basically, besides a couple of teams, basically just kind of shut everybody down. So that being said, I think I really like their matchup. Obviously, behind the Penn State draw, I would say Arizona State's is up there for some of the best draws here in this 12-team playoff. So,
yeah, definitely. I don't think anyone's worried about the Texas-Clemson results there. Especially, I do think Texas is going to win that, and I don't think that Quinn Ewers is that good. I don't think he can lead them to be at ASU. So I'm more so looking forward to what we would see after that, which I'm assuming is going to be an Oregon poll there. And honestly, it's going to be an interesting game. One of our close, that's one of ASU's not biggest rivals, but they play them a lot, obviously. And Kenny Dillingham, he was an Oregon offensive coordinator, so it's going to be interesting to see him match up against his old team. He kind of knows how they like to play. He is an offensive guy, but I'm sure he'll speak into his like defensive coordinator's scheme for that game, and that'll be interesting to see how those like two shootout style teams go at it. And I think that's going to be a very good game. I don't see Arizona State losing their first one, to be honest. So I think Oregon's going to be the big test.
If they play the way they played in that Big 12 championship game, they should have no problem playing most likely Oregon and the college football semifinals. And I didn't realize that Kenny Dillingham
I think honestly you lucked out by not seeing Ohio State, Tennessee, or Oregon until the semifinals, just in the fact that Tennessee, Ohio State's going to play a really tough game, and then they're going to go play Oregon, which is going to be another really tough game. And so now, by the time they're playing Arizona State, you're on your potentially third tough game if it's Ohio State or Tennessee, or Oregon, you're coming off of a really hard-fought win. And now here comes Arizona State off what should be a relatively easy win, I think, matching up against an Oregon team potentially in the semifinals that, like we've been saying, Arizona State's on a roll. They've got momentum. And Oregon's going to be kind of slugging their way to get to the semifinals. So I like the matchup there.
And the college football semifinal is the Cotton Bowl for that game, so it's back at where they just won the Big 12 championship game. So, I mean, looking at the home field advantages as we were talking about, like Oregon getting to play in the Rose Bowl, and I said it before it started, just Arizona State not getting the draw of the Fiesta Bowl since the Fiesta Bowl is at the Cardinals Stadium. Obviously, that would have been a match made in heaven for them, but that didn't turn out the way they wanted it to. But like Brady said jokingly, I think they'll take any draw that they can get right this year, just making it in. So, yeah, other than that, Ryan, Brady, you guys got anything?
I don't think so, man. I think you got to watch out for them, though. I do.
Yeah.
It's at least going to be fun football to watch.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think this is the team that we always see it in the NFL playoffs, where you've got a lower seeded wild card team that just comes in on a roll, and they end up beating all of the division leaders and make their way to the Super Bowl just because they're hot at the right time. And I think Arizona State's hot at the right time and really benefited from this playoff system.
2 weeks rest doesn't hurt anybody either. And that's the big thing.
Time.
So
big time.
So
yeah, I would agree with that. They're definitely hot right now, and I think college is becoming more like the NFL in that any given team, like within the top quadrant, right, of skill, any given team can beat any other team on any given day. So it's really who's hot, and their buys can help them a lot. So it'll be fun to watch.
Yeah, it's not like there's one dominant team this year in college football. I mean, Oregon's had close games. I mean, Georgia's had close games, lost a couple. I mean, you look at these top teams and they're like, oh, well, they lost to them and whatever. We can play that crisscross game like we did on one episode, right, Ryan, where we went for 30 minutes talking about this team beat them, but then they lost there. But we're not going to go down that chute. But so that's going to do it. Brady, we appreciate you for joining us. We're for sure had you on if the Cardinals can maybe sneak into the playoffs, maybe sneak back into the NFC West leading board, but
not looking good. Not looking too good.
Maybe just possibly, but
yeah, this definitely won't be the last time we'll see Brady here on the podcast.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Definitely. Or one of my brothers. That'd be an interesting. Well, Ryan and I have talked about that, setting up Blake or Ben. They'd love to come talk some golf.
Yeah, two big time golfers. That's all I'm gonna say is they are. Brady did not get the long end of the stick there on his, other than driving the ball 375 yards. And me and Ryan choking a 10-stroke lead in the scramble in the last 5 holes. But you know what? We're going to leave that for another time. So, yeah, go check out all the social medias, the merch, everything like that. And Brady, we thank you again for joining us. And we'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.
Thanks for having me.
And I guess it's just how it